2023 brought forth a change in my relationship. I am no longer married. And so some of the struggles that have come along with that, it's that time of year where we all are thinking about 2023 is coming to an end. 2024 is right around the corner. And if you're like most people, we start to evaluate and look back on what I accomplished. These are my goals for next year. But my purpose of today's conversation is I saw a question or I saw something on social media, and it pretty much was like, what are the lessons that you've learned in 2023, or what lessons have you learned this year? And I felt like this would be a great conversation for me to have with on this podcast. And I want to take a moment just not only to take a pause and share with you my experience, but also encourage you to do the same. So I feel like 2023 has been full of lessons. I have to take a moment and step aside because sometimes for me, especially, I get so wrapped up in what's next and what I'm doing, and I don't take the time to stop and recognize and appreciate and allow myself to honor myself in the areas in where I've grown and evolved. So the fact that I'm here, the fact that I have done what it takes to really get comfortable with sharing the deepest, most intimate parts of my life. In 2023, I launched this podcast. I shared the story of my mental health. I've shared experiences on things that were some of the most uncomfortable things to share, especially when it comes to the assaults that I've experienced or the story and history about my biological father and the current situation that he's in. I didn't share those things just because I wanted to shock factor or I wanted to trauma dump or I wanted to air my dirty laundries for people to pity or look at me or get attention. It was more or less because those things that I held so closely to me that even people that knew me in my own personal life did not know, because I felt like there was so much shame and guilt, and it was heavy. It was getting heavy to carry. And I know that the more that we share stories, there's so much healing, both the person that's telling the story and the person that's digesting the story. I want to cultivate a place to where sharing stories promotes healing. It promotes people feeling seen and connection. The huge thing that I'm most proud of is the fact that I had the courage to do it, even though I was afraid. There were a couple of people, one person in particular that I decided to share some of this stuff with. And this person can probably tell you that there were times where I was literally nauseous and terrified of the response that I would get. And this person encouraged me. And it's one of those things that now looking back, it was one of the greatest things that I'm the most proud of. The fact that even with each episode, even with each interview, even with each story that I share, comes with significant behind the scenes challenges or behind the scenes emotions. Sometimes you may see it here. It's just one of those things where I become so comfortable and I feel that this will serve a greater good than me sitting in my discomfort or me being in my shame. There's that. And then even then, I have to take a step and recognize that even with my podcast being in the infancy series, I had a vision to have a live conversation, and that sparked a new idea and experience that I truly enjoyed. And me recognizing that I launched this podcast in May, and by September, I was having my first live conversation. And I didn't allow, yeah, there were moments where I'm like, what if I fail? What if no one shows up? Or what if it bombs? Or what if people don't get anything? Or what if I'm just terrible at it? Or what if I allow my innate nature of being shy and reserved and a little bit more reticent to speak up come to the point to where I don't do well? But it was actually the opposite. Yeah, yes, I had technical challenges. Yes, had things that I wish I've won differently, but it's all learning and I'm growing. And so those things are the things that when I look back at 2023, I'm really incredibly proud of because of me pushing myself to look beyond the fear and the what ifs and get to a point to where I'm going to put myself in a position that perhaps one day somebody that may be experiencing some of the things that I felt or experienced in my life will help somebody in the future to know that life doesn't stop with this challenge or life doesn't and when these things come up, that there's still hope and that you can be inspired to keep going and share your story. So that way we can cultivate a community of people that, promote and encourage healing and inspire growth and evolve. So that's that. Something else that I really want you to take note of in the lessons that I've learned in 2023 is that I am stronger and more resilient than I gave myself credit for. 2023 brought forth a change in my relationship. I am no longer married. And so some of the struggles that have come along with that transition have had me in a place to where I was in my lowest of lows and in a place to where I felt very intense and uncomfortable emotions. And it's not necessarily just with the disruption and dissolution of the marriage. It was me having to redefine me having to sit in that pool of hurt and self-awareness and learn to redefine and pick myself back up. It's going into and facing some of the hard conversations that I've had to have or facing some of the hard conversations with my relationship with myself because just to be 100% transparent and honest, when I got married, I was not in a place to where I was resonating self-love and self-care, and I was doing things from a place that lacked self-love. And so it was like having those tough conversations with myself. It's like, how did I get here? Why did I get here? How do I get better? And what can I do to prevent myself from making decisions from that place from the lack of self-love? Grateful for the marriage and relationship because it brought forth a beautiful family, beautiful children that I adore and are my biggest blessings that continually teach me lessons each and every day. I'm not going to say that I have regret when it comes to that, but it's just divorce allows you to sit there and figure out, okay, what's next? Because now that this huge shift has taken place, what's next? Going through divorce puts you in a place to where you have to feel like you got to rediscover you. And especially, like I mentioned before in prior episodes, as a woman, oftentimes we allow ourselves to be defined and determined by these roles. I am getting to the place of where I am entertaining the idea of dating. I will say I'm taking it very slow. I have dipped my toe in the dating pool here and there, trying to make sense of the world now because before when I was dating, it was totally different. And so now it's more of a place where everything is online and apps. And that experience with trying an app here and there has been a totally different experience for me, which I could probably do a whole series on that. But now I'm in a place to where, to be quite honest, yes, I have experienced those moments where I'm like, I feel extremely lonely. I feel extremely by myself, wallowing and longing for that connection. But then through me working on my attachments and working on healing and really sitting and being in isolation for a good portion of this year, I learned to really start to enjoy my own company, rediscover what makes me unique, what makes me happy, despite the fact that I did have those spurts of loneliness or feeling like I am destined to be single for the rest of my life. I would say with the last month or so, I had a weekend where I was by myself and I found myself really enjoying that experience of being able to watch the movie that I wanted to watch, sit and soak in a tub and just enjoying being around my own company. And I find that incredibly encouraging and showing the signs of healing because I'm in a place to where I don't feel like I'm lacking a person or lacking a relationship or I don't feel like I'm any less whole because I don't have a partner right now. I'm actually happy and content in me being okay with being single. Now, just because I said that I'm okay and I'm not longing for that does not mean that I don't want that eventually one day. I'm going to make sure that I work on what I need to rectify within myself before I rush into the next relationship that I decide to enter in. That's something else that I'm proud of, that I'm allowed myself to be even open to the idea of dating in 2023 after my divorce. That was one of the most intimidating things is what does life look like as a single person? And that was intimidating because of course, in order to eventually have another life partner, you have to date. It's just the idea that I have to put myself out there and the fact that I was able to do that and I got over the scaries of over the idea of being rejected or the idea of things not working out. That's one of the things I can be proud of to say that even though that was something that intimidated me, even though I was afraid of being rejected or ghosted, which is something that I'm finding with this current culture of dating that's pretty common. I don't allow that to impact how I feel about myself or the outlook that I have for my future. That's another significant thing. And I'm incredibly proud of. And the lesson that I've learned is that not everybody is going to be for you, and you can't allow that to determine how you feel about yourself. One other thing that I want to say is that I learned this year is I learned to really rediscover me and who I am. Now that I'm at the other side of the divorce and divorce has happened, I find myself with free time and I'm like, what do I do with myself? Because everything that I had done for these past 10, 11 years after becoming a mom is been centered around my role as a wife or as a mom or both. And so things like roller skating is something that I've picked up and started to do more often, which brings me a lot of joy. Traveling, I have now gotten to the point to where I am not intimidated to go to a new city, a new state and explore it on my own. So that's something that I'm really incredibly proud of because there are people, and I don't think that was one of them, but maybe there's times where I'm maybe self-aware of going to a restaurant alone or going this place alone and the perceived judgment that you may experience because people may like, oh, she's sitting at a table eating alone. It's one thing to go to dinner alone, but it's another thing to travel to a different city, different state alone and explore that on your own. And so I want to say that I'm incredibly proud, and the lesson that I learned is that even if I have to do it alone, as long as I'm being safe about it, it's okay. It's okay to experience those beautiful moments that's only you will remember, and you don't have to wait to have that perfect partner or that friend or situation in order to experience those things. It's perfectly okay to do it all by your lonesome. So that is something else that I have taken as a lesson that I'm incredibly proud of over this year is that I've done more things like that. I've allowed myself this year to become incredibly vulnerable and have a different level of intimacy with myself and the relationships around me. I've become incredibly vulnerable and more intimate with my relationship with God from me being more aware of things that He may drop in my spirit or my mind or my heart. And instead of questioning and having resistance towards the things that scare me ultimately, case in point, this podcast, I've allowed myself to now sometimes kicking and screaming to do those things and be open to those ideas and open to those experiences. It also translates to my relationship with myself. So I know that one of the things that I mentioned throughout my life story that I shared in the first series or first episodes of this podcast is that typically when I'll experience tough and hard situations, I allow myself to stuff all that stuff down and not really experience or kind of disassociate from it. But being in a place to where I've allowed myself to really sit in the uncomfortable and the feels of the things that I've experienced over this last year, particularly, I've learned that I've become more intimate and aware with myself as far as my emotions and not judging myself for feeling those emotions. And when I do find myself in a place where I don't know what that emotion is, rather than deflect or distract myself. I've allowed myself to sit and I've done more journaling and I've done more discovering the traits and the attitudes and the behaviors and the way that I attach to people and really exploring that and getting to a place to where I feel like it's not maybe the best or healthy, really taking the steps to pull that apart and just sit as raw and vulnerable and open as I can be with myself and really work to get better in those areas. So that's something else that I learned this year is to really to lean into that and be more intimate and vulnerable. And it's even translated into my personal relationships with friends that I've had for a long time and people that in the hindsight of me being in a place to where I've lost 2 friends to death that were within a year or 2 of my age, really set home with me that our time here is not infinite, that it is something that will come to an end, and it's not guaranteed that it'll happen when we're in our 70s or 80s. It could happen at any time. And so with that being said, I really adopted the mindset of I'd rather say what I feel now when I have the moment and the ability to do so rather than wonder what if I would have said something. There have been people on the other end of those conversations that probably felt some a little uncomfortable with me expressing my innermost thoughts and vulnerabilities and feelings where typically I hold that to myself or say it's not the right time or get embarrassed or have that fear of being rejected. But then on the other end of that, it's like freedom. I feel that's something that I'm proud of. And I think that I've adopted in my way of life going forward is that instead of me holding on to feelings that can either turn into resentment or rejection, my fear of rejection, or just unexpressed gratitude for someone. I've just been able to shift my idea of what it means to really have an intimate relationship and I'm able to be more grateful and show my gratitude, have more reverence for God, express my true, most innermost feelings to people that I care about or people that have made insignificant impacts in my life. And rather than allowing my ego, my pride, my fear of being rejected or vulnerable, of being rejected or being too vulnerable, get in the way of me having that freedom on the other side of saying the things or doing the things or expressing myself, I just decided that I just will live my life where I'm just authentically and uncomfortably honest and transparent and say what I feel when I feel it. So that's something it's I'm incredibly proud of. Now, as far as what I'm transitioning into next year, I'm not quite sure. I'm still working on that. All I know is that as I continue to grow and evolve, I will continue to push the envelope for me, become more authentic and really embrace my uniqueness and challenge some of the thought processes that kept me caged in before and embrace myself as I continue to expand and grow. So at the end of 2024, I could be sitting before you and having a totally different conversation about the next big thing that I've done or the next big experience that I've done. But what I will say is that despite the fact of I went through so much hard between 2023 and back, I am approaching my life with a different perspective, a new lens, a different appreciation, a different type of gratitude. That even though I know that things will get hard and you will experience those hard things, you will experience heartbreaks and significant losses, you will experience grief. But on the other side of that hard lies beauty, so much beauty and freedom that I think that's my biggest lesson overall in life is that on the other side of the darkness, there is light and that there's growth. There's the beautiful rainbow off the storm. There's so many things that you can look forward to that even though I've hit rock bottom more than one time in my life, and even within this year, I have been able to maintain this idea. I've been able to really get to a place that I know that it's hard right now, but it won't be hard always. And that some of the most beautiful stories come from a source of pain. So, with that said, I am going to enter a conversation here. I'm looking forward to hearing about what your biggest lessons learned were in 2023 And even if you started to plan for 2024, I'm curious as to what you are looking forward to. I want you to stay tuned and follow me on my social media. I am active on TikTok as well as Instagram and Facebook. If you're not following me there, I encourage you to do so. Always check out my website because as I am planning and getting prepared for the new year, that means it's going to be more things upcoming with my Uniquely Noble, more events, more workshops, and I'm hoping that I can get it together to have my very first retreat. So if you want to stay tuned, obviously I'm not able to make all the updates here within my podcast episodes, but if you want to stay in the know, go to my website, go join my newsletter. Also, stay tuned on my social media accounts and just stay tuned here. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and do that. And turn on the notification bell so that you're always aware of what I post and when I post. I have certainly enjoyed this conversation. I'm looking forward to hearing from you in the comments. And until the next one, have a good one.